Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review the Guyver 2 Dark Hero. So really, I do actually thoroughly enjoy this sequel. Really, there are some points in time where a lot of people could moan and groan about it because it's 2 hours and 8 minutes. And a lot of people would say it's like, yeah, this kind of has like a made for TV quality, and there also is some creatures that are definitely recycled from the original film to this one. Uh, Really, we have, I think, the Guyver suit that comes off as like drastically a lot more blue in this movie, like as if they like repainted it. I guess like it just looks weird. Because immediately once I saw it, especially when we get to the actual day like moments, I was like, whoa, like that is way more blue than I remember it being. Like it's like a hard dark blue, where I think like the in the original movie it felt like a lighter blue, but like I don't, or like a lighter blue or like a gray. But all of a sudden, once we get during the day moments, I'm like, holy crap, this looks dark blue, or like a blue. So a blue. Anyway, so pushing on. So this movie is to be taken supposedly 1 year after the original Guyver movie, so hence why everyone is to supposedly look different from its original thing. And so really, I like the fight sequences in this movie. I feel like the fight sequences are just a little bit better when we actually get to them. Because some people might feel like, yeah, but they kind of skip out on the fight sequences, or like they do reuse some of the monsters from like the original movie to this one. Like, yeah, but they also like try some new things in this movie also, so give them credit for that. Uh, Really, you can kind of see like there's some problems with like CGI when, of course, you had to physically show like Barker changing from himself to the Guyver. Uh, you can also honestly see like the pieces just like coming into CGI'd frame. Also, this movie seems way too closely choreographed, or whichever. Like the fight scenes and everything feel way too much like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Like there were scenes where like I saw like some girl like ducking over and like some Zoinoid or something flying over her head, and I was like, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I was like, ba 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 ba. I can't help it. Like, yeah, it had that kind of feel to it, and I know everyone's gonna say that. I know everyone's gonna complain about it, uh, but also like every single like monster and or like Guyver, they all had to have these like different sounding like voices or had like these weird sound effects to accompany them. But here's also the thing. I don't feel like this movie needed to be 2 hours and 8 minutes. Like, really. They could have cut out a lot of Corey's father, Marcus. They could have cut a lot of that out. They could have cut a lot of that. Just like succulently taking that out could have really helped this film and could have honestly got them under like at least like an hour and like 45 at least, because there was a lot going on with that, and I was like, why do like, because like the dialogue, they could have shaved some dialogue parts too. Like there was some dialogue where I'm like, I don't even care about this little part here where Corey is just like pining over Barker. Like I don't care about that. Like, no, let's get to the nitty gritty and like I guess it's just to like help us transition to the real story. But I actually liked this. I actually liked this story. Like this also kind of reminds me of like Smallville. If a lot of people remember the early seasons of Smallville, where like Clark Kent used to spend a lot of time in a cave, and he used to see like Kryptonian like kind of like cave scratches upon this cave in the early seasons of Smallville. and then eventually like Clark goes and like gets that one piece and connects it, and all of a sudden he's talking to his father in this cave. Like, yeah, like this kind of reminded me a lot of that, or like a lot of like Man of Steel, where eventually Superman is to go to like Antarctica and find his like his ship, like a ship from home, which that is what is to eventually happen in this movie. Is eventually we are to find a whoever the aliens were. They left a ship here within this film, and we have the people who are to go and dig that out. So, without a doubt, yeah, like that's kind of teeing it up in this movie and almost kind of like spoiling it. But like, it's either people are interested in this movie or they could care less because they're just like, hey, Guyver thing, ooh, Guyver, another Guyver thing, wow, all right. Because I don't know how anyone feels about this movie. I like it. Like I like the story, and everything else is just kind of just there. Like so good enough story to me. Uh, like this kind of brings back by vibes of like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, but like plus this was also something that I've never seen before. Like this was like a first time watching of this. Like I think I at one point in time like started to watch the beginning of this, but I never fully fledgedly like watched this movie. So like this was like a first time ever watching, and I was like, okay, like this actually has a pretty decent story. And like I think that's the only thing that really had to win me over was just like, but there was like a lot of action sequences. There was some times where, of course, you could see the puppet strings. Let's just say in parts of this film because this movie was just done cheaply. You can't not like not argue that it wasn't like not done cheaply, but at least like they tried a lot of things. They attempted like quite a bit of interesting things. They did some like different things compared to the original Guyver movie, where they did some stuff with lasers, bizarrely, coming out of the Guyver's head. It kind of feels like they did like some things here and there, just different from the original one, and I actually liked that they like tried to like expand the ability of this character. So yeah, I enjoyed that. Uh, I honestly just kind of wish that like there was still like more like I wish that we could have had just some kind of like I don't want this character to eventually turn into like a Spawn kind of character where all of a sudden he just has all this like way too many customizational things. But I wish it would kind of get close to that in all brutal honesty, where all of a sudden like you would just have this Guyver that maybe every time he changed from Barker to Guyver, all of a sudden like we would just have this like unique thing that came out of this armor somewhere where all of a sudden we are just like, whoa, how is it all of a sudden that that's there now? Wait, how all of a sudden is like they could make like surprising like things of this character that were like, whoa, like he's doing this now in this movie, like wow, that's surprising. um but really it just kind of feels like they tried to improve everything but the Guyver in this movie. It's like, well, hey, let's try and like make a kind of cool villain in this movie, and hey, let's try to um, like make some better action sequences than before. But like they also like shortened up the fins or the blades from the first movie, and plus also I think they consistently had the blades out in this film compared to the original, where it like would like come in and out, where in this movie it's just kind of like they're consistently there, I think, for the most part. But anyways, so with that said, I've talked about this for 10 minutes, so let's go on our way into spoiler territory. When I probably get into spoilers, probably some person is gonna like want a minute detail, and I am probably just gonna be like, dude, the it's the Guyver 2. I wasn't even expecting like the Guyver to do well, but like the Guyver 2 was just like, wow. Like I was just kind of like, and like I just saw Guyver 1, and now I'm like watching this movie. I'm like, wow, it kind of feels like day and night. Kind of feels like I just watched a goofy kind of fun movie, and now I'm in the sequel. I'm like, okay, this is real. Like there's some actually good story here. I was surprised. Plus, it also has that like R rating, I think, in this one compared to the original, which I think I was much more won over by because a little bit more gore or whatever. So, with that said, let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time to spoil this movie. So, details, what they'll be. However, people are specific about details, whatever. You can review. Go ahead and review it. Go ahead. Anyways, be a reviewer as well. Review this movie, especially if you've seen it 100 times. So, the very beginning of this movie, we have Guyver 1 year later. So, Barker is to mention how he looks drastically different than the other character, but that doesn't happen at all. So, Barker is to mention how he took out the Cronus Corporation 1 year ago, how he took out all the Zoonoids 1 year ago, how he let Max Reed, aka Mark Hamill, die 1 year ago. Sadly enough, R.I.P. Mark Hamill, no! Oh well. I didn't think he was going to be in the sequel anyways. So, even if he was going to, like, come back to life. So, Barker is mentioning that he has been the Guyver for 1 year, and it seems like he has much more of a bloodlust, or really just wanting to much more like go for the kill than anything else. So you would have thought there would have been like a lot more accidents that would have happened, like that, like Guyver would just be killing people, like just because he's like, hi, I just have that itch. I just have that itch to kill. Like this also kind of feels like the Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance to me, where like Nicolas Cage in that movie, like granted if like it's the second Ghost Rider movie, but you had like Ghost Rider who was kind of like having that itch to like be the writer, and like he was trying to hold off as much as humanly possible, and like that story was a lot more darker, but I kind of enjoyed like bits and pieces of that movie, and still like it is what it is. So but this Guyver is to go on and need to forcibly defend his city. Where this location is, I don't actually remember, but it's not evidently LA, because that is previously where the other Guyver movie had taken place in. So we have a bunch of drug dealers that ended up putting a bunch of their product into dolls. And so all of a sudden we have like some drug dealer who's like, yeah, like I'm making a big killing. Like I'm stealing so much stuff. Yeah. And so like one of the other guys just goes and like picks it up, and he's like, dolls? Like, really? Like, you're stealing dolls. What's wrong with you? But I think there's something inside the dolls. So all of a sudden we have this Guyver who is to have this urge to kill. And so we now have this sequence like the bandana gang sequence in the very first film that the Guyver now has to go and prove that he can just murder humans in this in this first film. So the Guyver goes on and is to like again like kind of start chucking people again, but like it's chucking people with a purpose to kind of make people aware that he's here, that he's in the scene. But eventually, once the Guyver is to make his way down to the drug dealers, all of a sudden we have kind of like a Batman 1989 kind of approach to these like fight sequences. All of a sudden, like we feel like there's a lot more like technique kind of thing where there's like a ton of blocking against this one guy, where like the Guyver is just like blocking like crazy, and eventually going and taking this guy down. And so I think there's a lot better sequences here. There is like the Guyver dodging a lot of bullets like Wonder Woman with her bracelets. And I'm just like, man, this is cool. Like, this is kind of winning me over to say like that the Guyver has since improved. Because it just seems like in the in the first film they didn't use as much. Like how like bullets would probably just bounce off a lot of the Zonoids, or just kind of bounce off like the Guyver or whatever. They didn't play with that much, where I think in this movie they play with it a lot more. So so that leads to eventually the Guyver just kind of like taking these guys all out, and eventually I think he ends up actually killing the main drug dealer, and he ends up like slicing him with his freaking elbow blade. So I'm like, wow, like this is actually a really good like start of this. Like I'm really just okay with how this movie like started off. I was kind of impressed. I was like, wow, like they're seemingly doing things different than the original. Like hands off to them. So like there's a lot of goofy things that they did in the first film, and I was just like going like this a lot like during the film, where like this one I was just like, wow, all right, points to you, points to Gryffindor. So moving on. So one thing that Guyver was to do that kind of feels like the hero insignia, the Guyver was to go and like have his pinball-esh like thing just kind of laser out the Guyver logo, and all of a sudden like the police have like made their way into this spot to go and arrest all these thugs, and they're like, oh yeah, I guess it's the Guyver again, because look, he etched his name out. Isn't that cool? So transitioned us to have Guyver transitioning back into Barker, and so Barker is to go home and just straight up have nightmares. Like, I think that this is kind of like Sigourney Weaver in Aliens, where like Sigourney Weaver is to consistently have nightmares that aliens are popping out of her chest. Like, I think they kind of took that from like that, or whenever this movie came out, and that I don't know, but whatever. Like the Guyver is having these nightmares about him having to put all this armor on, and it like this scene looks very like Evil Dead-esh, where you have like all this armor coming onto him, and it looks like really close up, and I'm like, okay, here's where the money is in this one. Here's where the money is, the money shot for this movie. So Barker is to have these nightmares, waking up like just he doesn't know when he's going to consistently keep living this life of being this killing machine, basically, because it's close to what he is. So anyways, so the Guyver is to go and, or Barker, because he's out of the suit. Barker is to go and just start these like scribbles and whatever consistently. You can say that his technique is what it is, but as far as drawing goes, but really the drawings are to eventually match something, and so give him that. So uh, all of a sudden we are to see a guy called uh, Cutlow, and he is to have been seeing a monster on TV. And so, evidently, what ends up happening here is this Cutlow guy is to draw these sketches of which that he had seen of like where this monster had came out of, and like some kind of scribbles of where that had happened. So all of a sudden we have Barker that is looking at his scribbles, and he's like, wait a minute, like those match up to mine. Like, wow, like I need to go wherever this guy is, and I need to go and like figure out where these scribbles are coming from, because I need to like there's something calling me, and so I need to go. And so also we have to kind of do some kind of understanding of why Barker is going to completely bail on Mitski in this sequel. So we have this flashback between Barker and Mitski, and so I guess Barker, considering all the nightmares that he's had and how like Barker is to keep thinking that the Zoonoids are still alive and they're still brewing something up. And Mitski is like, no, like, we took all of them out. It's all over. And so Barker is like, but wait, there's Zoonoid sightings. Evidently somebody like saw werewolves in Utah. And Mitski is like, no, the Kronos is gone. Like, they're dead. Like, we took them out. Believe me, they're done. But then, evidently, like, Mitski doesn't know that mother effers be setting up franchises, and so they're like McDonald's. So you can't get rid of them. Because technically that's obvious that it's going to happen everywhere. It's not like it's going to be a worldwide kind of thing. And so sadly enough, there isn't enough Guyvers to go around, if you know what I mean. So Barker is to head to some store to, coincidentally enough, bump into some girl who is to be Corey. And so Barker is to say, hey, like, you work at that, like, cave, right? Like, you guys are mining at this cave? Well, hey, like, I have, like, a bunch of drawings that I've been working on, and, like, I don't know, there's just something about these drawings that are kind of connecting me to these caves. And so Barker is showing Corey these drawings, and Corey is like, wow, like, how do you know about these drawings? And Barker is like, I don't know. Like, I just know. I just know that I should draw them. And so, it's like, God, what was it? The guy from As Good as It Gets, where it's like, I have to draw you. It's like, I have to draw them. So, Corey is to, of all things to get, she ends up buying a huge thing of beer, because if anything is gonna keep these people mining, it's a what, a 24 pack? 24 pack, right? Of brewskis? But funny enough, like, the beer, like, obviously doesn't have a name that's probably gonna be sponsored, so they kind of avoided some stuff there. So Corey is like, okay, like, Barker, we can just kind of have you as like have you come with us, but yeah. So Corey is to mention that she's Corey Edwards and she's a scientist. What, is she going to be a Ghostbuster anytime soon? I don't know. So, and so eventually Corey Edwards is to eventually like kind of show Barker around. Eventually, meeting her father, who is Marcus. And so Marcus is talking to Crane, I guess the guy who is kind of funding this, and like some other schlub that I can joke around about. So, uh, but eventually Corey goes and takes Barker and gives him to Bob. And so Bob is kind of telling like Barker technically what they're doing there. Like supposedly that they're gonna dig up supposedly a dinosaur. And Barker's not quite buying that. It's like, you know what? I think that you guys are stumbling upon something else and you just don't want to tell me. Because eventually, when Barker is to re ask Corey what they're doing here, Corey gives the identically same answer. And so then, and then Barker is just like, okay, that seems really fishy. Like, you guys all have the same answer. What are you all really doing here? And then all of a sudden, Corey breaks into the fact of like, well, everyone knows what we're doing here. It's like, well, Barker doesn't because that's why he's asking. That's why he's asking. So, so after kind of Barker and Bob are going and like going through and like seeing things, eventually that gets at the end of the day, both Barker and Corey are to spend a little bit more time together by this truck. So Corey is asking Barker if he's some like archaeological groupie, and Barker is just like, no, like if anything, I just feel like connected here, like I just sense something is just like bringing me here and I just don't know what it is. And so it kind of feels like Corey wants to know Barker's story, but like Barker is just like, yeah, like there isn't much I can tell you because top secret kind of thing. So here's the more interesting part. So we have dumb hillbilly going out into the forest of all places with a reporter to supposedly go out into the wilderness thinking that he can find a werewolf. Does that sound dumb to anybody? Because here's the thing. One, why would you just go out with a shotgun to go and take down a werewolf? Shouldn't you have like a machine gun? Like, shouldn't you bring like grenades with you? Like, shouldn't you have... And plus also, like, you have a reporter who has no weapon whatsoever to his name. So, but yeah, so like Cutler is thinking that he's like, man, I'm gonna go, I want to get paid, and so hopefully this reporter is gonna snap a quick picture of this thing, and we're gonna get the heck out of here, and we're gonna have proof. So Corey and Barker are going on to like have Corey kind of tell Barker her life story, where she's mentioning that her and her father are to like be in this specific kind of field, that eventually they should get jackets made. That's how like cool that they think both of them are. Sure. So and so also Corey is mentioning that she is to kind of believe in a number of like things, that Sasquatch could exist and that aliens could exist, and like so like that's where kind of Corey is kind of heading to eventually try to discover any number of those kinds of things. So Curlo is this hillbilly is to I always have to like anybody who wears like flannel and seems like the hillbilly character. I'm sorry if that seems like a horrible thing to just kind of stereotype somebody, but like anyway, so Curlo is to have found the zoonoid. It's not a werewolf, it's obviously a zoonoid, and it kind of looks like a rhino or a rhinoceros like zoonoid. Like it would kind of look like the Spider-Man Rhino character. But here's the thing, like this thing doesn't sound like a rhino. It kind of sounds like the Dragon Zord from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and it also sounds like a cat that's like sadly enough like not in a good mood, let's just say. Like if it's like I don't know, like getting freaking like usually those kind of sounds like make it sound like a cat would be like being flung around or something. Sounds awful. Um, but it is what it is there. So this Zoonoid is to go and to just kind of make its way over to say hello to both of these humans. And so the Zoonoid is to be just so intelligent, and this Zoonoid is to kill the press guy that is to not have a weapon to his name. And and so the guy that does have a weapon, the Zoonoid doesn't like go and after that guy. What a ignoramus. So all of a sudden, we of course have like Corey thinking that there could quite possibly be another bear attack on the loose. We of course have people screaming bloody murder, and like here was the thing: we had like Curlo that had his gun out, and like the paparazzi character was to try to shoot pictures of this thing, and Curlo was like, "Hey, like take the pictures so I can get my money," and like all that the press guy cared about is like shoot this thing, shoot it. Like yeah, that's not gonna work out that well, sadly enough. But like you just have to, I guess, perfectly shoot it in the right spot. So Carly is hearing like there quite possibly could be another bear attack on the way. And here's the thing, when we always have a monster attack, like obviously a monster attack, it's like, well, it's a bear or it's a cougar, or it's a jaguar or mountain lion or whatever the heck. Like they never just like I would just say, you know what, it's probably a monster. It's probably a monster just nibbling on people. Like just let him nibble and just let him go off there, you know? So Corey is running back to be with all the people, like talk to Atkins and talk to a lot of the guys to go out there to help Curlo. Like they're bringing in like weapons and all kinds of stuff. And so while she's doing that, uh, Barker is going out to where the people are, and Corey's like, wait a minute, you're going out to fight the bear, or you're going after the bear? Like, are you insane? But Corey's just like, well, if he dies, he dies. I'm just gonna go out and just and kind of get other people to come with me to help Curlo. So we have, of course, Barker running, and then he's like Guyver, and then so all of a sudden, all of the Guyver pieces come together to create this Guyver suit, and so now we have the Guyver confronting this Zoonoid. He's not doing the whatever thing from the original movie. He's kind of like he has like no like thing from other movie, so that's great. So the Guyver is asking like, where did this thing come from? Like, excuse me. The Guyver had thought that it had killed all the Zoonoids. So where is this creature's origins? Like where is this from? So we have eventually that like we have this really cool fight out where this Zoonoid is eventually grabbing this tree trunk and ripping it off and like attacking this Guyver with this tree trunk. And I was like, man, this actually like is a pretty decent fight. There's like a lot of where like the Guyver is kind of like like jumping from like a tree to tree kind of spot and kind of like going down on the Zonoid. Like this fight actually looks pretty cool. There is a lot of that like Mortal Kombat repetitious kicking crap that I don't actually enjoy. But like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers does that a lot, so again, this movie kind of has to do that too. Uh, like there's a lot of the Mortal Kombat like Liu Kang repetitious kick thing that I'm just like, man, like they gotta bring that back in a lot of other movies. Just like bizarrely, just bring that back, even if it doesn't make sense. Like if it's just a seemingly normal fight, just bring back in the Liu Kang like quadruple kick thing, and just be like, what was that about? Just to confuse people. So, but there's a lot of that going on in this movie with the Guyver. So uh, but eventually, while these two are fighting, eventually the people are to come from Corey's people, and that leads to have both the Zoanoid and the Guyver kind of looking where all these people are. And so immediately the Zoanoid is to run off, and so the Guyver is to turn back into Barker. And so Curlo is to say to like Barker, it's like, you're one of them. And so obviously Atkins and like Corey are like saying like this guy's in shock. There's something wrong with him. So eventually they're probably thinking like this guy probably just needs a good night's sleep and maybe that'll be okay. So that leads us to uh like them wanting to get like Curlo multiple blankets, and then so we have this conversation uh between both Atkins and Barker, because Atkins is really just like, okay, like why is it that you ran out here? Like why is it that you are not dead like the other people that came out here? It seems like you, son, probably have some claws that you're not showing, and I want to know why. And so Barker is just like, well, I don't have claws, but maybe something else does. So, and also, like, Barker is just like, well, who are you exactly to be questioning me of anything? It seems like you have something that you're hiding as well. And Atkins is to say, it's like, well, yeah, I'm a government man. Because, like, Barker kind of figures that out, but, like, Atkins also like admits to it. It's like, well, yeah, I'm a government man, and like I don't want anyone else to know about it. And Barker is like, well, like he's kind of like secret safe with me kind of thing. He's not going to tell anybody, and because Barker is thinking that eventually he can use Atkins to help him, especially try to figure out who the Zoonoids are, or like eventually Barker can kind of zone in on who to trust, and he feels like he can trust Atkins because he's not part of the Cronus Corporation. So eventually we have one of the men who is a Zoonoid going and talking to the Kronos Corporation, and a lot of people would probably say that this guy who is to be like the owner of the Kronos Corporation looks a lot like Falcon from the other film, or Fulton from the other film, and I'm just like, well, maybe it's his brother. Maybe like every one of these guys just look freaking the same, and I'm like, please don't have us have another like Zolord thing in this movie. Could we just dodge that bullet again? I know this is a made for TV movie and they probably don't have that kind of budget, so I kind of feel relieved. But like I was just like, please let it just be left to the Zoonoids and just like have a lot of fun with that. So because if anything, I would have thought like if they would have done that in this movie, it probably would have mostly had to have been like a CGI creature, and I don't think that I could have like I think I would have just went click at that point. So this Zoonoid is talking to this, I'm assuming Zoolord of this other Cronus corporation, and so this guy's mentioning it's like, well, I guess the hunter is to become the hunted, where like I guess the Zoonoids thought that they could go and pick off all these humans and eventually just like keep all of this like spacecraft and everything for themselves. But I guess the further on they went into this, like, yeah, I guess like now that the Guyver is here and like obviously like he's shown himself that yeah, like not exactly going to be like the easiest way about going and murdering all these people when you have a guy in the way, so to speak. So so the very next day we have the people going into the cave, Corey's people. All of a sudden, they are to spot, like, hey, that wasn't there before in this cave, and like seems a little bit different than yesterday. So this leads Barker to now want to question Corey, and so Barker is kind of leaving time before he goes in to question Corey because Corey is talking to some other girl about Barker and how she's kind of like, kind of smitten with him. And it's like, maybe, like, if he probably isn't a crazy loon, like I think he might be, then, like, maybe there's some potential between me and him. So Barker makes his way into this spot to talk with Corey, and so conveniently this girl leaves so both of them could talk things out. And so Barker now has to ask Corey what they're really doing here, because it feels like Corey will open up to him compared to everyone else. And so that is to have Corey just say, like, well, okay, like, everybody really knows what's going on here, really, and we're digging up aliens. We're digging up an alien spacecraft. Like, that's what we're doing. If anything, all of the like these drawings seem very alien-ish, and so yeah, like, so it's obvious that we're kind of like messing with forces that we probably don't understand. But isn't it cool, right? Isn't there so much potential with this? So, like, Barker is just like, God, you people, you're gonna end up dead. You're gonna end up dead. So, and eventually Barker is going to have to break it to Corey that like basically break the truth that there are certain people in this camp that actually are zoonoids, and that he is almost to break to her that he's the Guyver, but he mostly talks about the Guyver unit. But we'll get to that when we get into this ship, because that's eventually going to happen. So they are digging up they're digging up more of this ship, and so all of a sudden one woman is to say like, oh, that feels like leather. Yeah, like, tell me what it's gonna feel like when it's gonna kill you after you touch it. Like, oh yeah, this feels like leather. Death. Like, that doesn't happen, but man, that would have been just like a hilarious thing. Just be like, yeah, you are gonna die because you're stupid. So the girl is like, oh, that feels like leather. And so they eventually start to dig up this ship. And so, like, Corey is, like, fantasizing and having all these fantasies about, like, the future, like, once they actually dig up more of this alien ship. That, like, maybe machines can just be grown, and, like, a bunch of, like, random, bizarre possibilities of, like, any thing could happen Wednesday when it comes down to Corey. And Barker is there, like, hearing all of this, and Barker should have said, "And you think I'm the crazy one? You're a loon too. You're a freaking loon, woman." So, Marcus and Crane and like this guy that obviously has his security hat for whatever freaking reason, uh, they are to go and try to like weld this ship open. And they're like, well, I guess we can't get into this ship that easily. And so they're kind of like thinking like what equipment that they can use to open up this ship. And so Marcus is like, well, like I don't know how much money we're gonna have to throw into like trying to open this ship. It's not as easy as saying open sesame. And so all of a sudden the ship is like, say what? Because I'm gonna open up my door. Because you said open sesame. That is the magic word. Coincidentally. Like as if, like, if you guys remember Lord of the Rings, where like they're to speak friend and enter with the whole like elvish door, and he's like Beldor, and then the door opens, like kind of that kind of thing happens here. So Marcus is to go and to get to like some hazmatic like suits and start to make his way into this ship. And so Corey is to all of a sudden have like taped this video of Marcus and these men going into the ship, which is to be seen while Marcus is coming back from out of the ship, and he is saying, "Well, I think there is breathable air in this ship. I think that the radiation levels are low. I think the bathroom definitely needs to be cleaned, but because I just took a huge in there, but I think everything else is like a-okay. So go on in there." So all of a sudden we just have like everybody and their brother is just like, "Hey, how about I go on the ship? Hey, how about I go on the ship?" I think there's way too many people like heading into this ship at this point, and I'm just like, wait a minute, should we rein this in? How many people are actually going in the ship? So, and also like people start to separate, and that is just an awful thing to do. So, uh, also I'm probably gonna need actually. Let me pause here for a second. Yeah, so I was thinking, like, hey, maybe I can probably figure out, like which, like Zoonoid is which in this movie, and yeah, I don't think that I actually can. Like, I was thinking, like, oh, maybe I can be able to like figure out like which Zoonoid is which, and maybe I could probably still do that because I'm like, I'm probably gonna get confused who is who, because like, in IMDb, like really the cast list just seems non-existent. Um, yeah, that doesn't help much either. Uh, let me pause here for a second. I'm gonna have to re-pause again, but I there's a whole reason for that. We're winging it. We're gonna wing it. So probably any words that are gonna be zoonoid are probably just gonna be like I'll probably have to describe some zoonoids to people, and we're gonna have to do it that way. Cause yeah, IMDb not a help. And also like anywhere that I was to search, you'd probably have to like really heavily Google, and plus also like this movie is not as big as probably the original one, where you can easily find a lot of stuff. Where this one probably not so much. A lot of recycling going on in this movie also. So the main zoonoid is to be Crane. So and that's the one to kind of focus on. Like everything else is like all the other zoonoids are just kind of just there. They're just kind of there to just beat up eventually Marcus. So let's go. And so let's go into the ship. And so we go into the ship, and so what happens in the ship is that Marcus is to go on with Crane and one other man, and eventually go into some part of the ship where it seems like they're going to need like some kind of like tether system or some kind of roping like system to be able to get to some part of the ship. And while that is going on, we also see Corey, who is going through one part of the ship that is to be kind of opening and closing like an eyeball or like a clam. And so Corey is to like start kind of like pulling like from like pieces from this thing as it's to open and close. And all of a sudden she is to pull out another Guyver unit. And she's like, yeah, this is great. Like another Guyver unit. Like awesome. And so once she is to take this to Marcus, her father, all of a sudden Crane is to grab onto this thing and like try to like walk out of here with it. And Corey is like, wait a minute, like what are you doing with that? You got to realize that we're going to need some like credit for this. Like we're going to get some money out of that. And Marcus is kind of like playing it off as just like, well, hey, like everything will be fine kind of thing. I'm like, no, I would be like fighting someone to death for that. Like, and Marcus is just like, well, hey, just let him have it and like all will go well. It's like, I don't think so. I think somebody's gonna get freaking effed over here, and it's not going to be Crane. So, but Barker is to go further onto this cave because Corey and Barker were having this moment, like before, like Corey was to go in the ship, and Barker's like, well, can and like Corey's like, come on, like you might as well. Like it seems like you have some bizarre connection with this ship and everything in it. So Barker is to separate himself from Corey and to make his way further on into this ship, where it seems like he's kind of at this kind of part where he's like kind of trying to communicate with the ship, and like he is to mention that he wants to be free of the Guyver, that he wants his old life back, and like he hates being a killer. And so while he is to be talking to this ship, we bizarrely have this one blonde woman that is like following Barker around and like kind of like let me listen in on what Barker is talking to this alien ship about, so I can probably use this against him later. Because eventually we have this blonde woman who I guess is to be a Zoonoid, because we'll see her later. Like, I think for her she kind of looks like a Ramsey kind of Zoonoid, where like bizarrely her like elephant trunk thing is kind of in the back of her head, but man, does that Zoonoid look really cool when eventually we get this like flushed out. Like I'm assuming she has to be like the feminine Zoonoid, because I think all the rest of them kind of look very like. There's one that looks like a Godzilla monster. Like that obviously is like a male one, and then there's also like a lot of recycling. Like the Lisker monster is to be used here. The Lisker transformation monster is to be used in this movie in flashback form. Uh, like a lot of the other like first Guyver like zoonoids are to be used in flashback form when like cavemen are to be transforming into zoonoids. Like that's kind of what you see, like the all the zoonoids from the previous film are right in the flashback scene. uh Also, besides Lisker's monster being reused here, I think a lot of the other ones are different. I think a lot of the other ones are uh, like kind of a little bit interesting. Um, anyways, so pushing on. So what ends up happening is that eventually Crane is to talk to Barker after getting information that can sway him to just be like, oh, I have a way to like have quite possibly Barker on my side. And so Crane is to eventually tell his boss that they have the Guyver unit, and but eventually Crane is to go back into the ship and kind of talk to Barker and mention it's like, well, hey, like if anything, like I'm sure you feel it, right? The ship calling you and like trying to be like a like-minded like trying to like sway Barker and like persuade him to just be like, yeah, like if anything, I don't want to be a Zoonoid. Like I don't want to be like this. And so like Crane shows himself, and so Crane is like, yeah, like this is ugly. Like, if anything, like maybe both you and me can team up together and we'll figure out how to like remove the Guyver from you so you can be free to do whatever you want. But like, here's the thing, the like Crane is not mentioning that he's going to free himself. No, he's just gonna try to persuade the ship to free Barker from being the Guyver. So I'm like, well, yeah, like that's obviously like, of course they're gonna do that because like just oh yeah, we're gonna figure out how this ship can like relieve you of your power, so I can just kill you and just kill all of everyone else because once they get what they came for, all of a sudden everyone is to basically get killed off. I think we just see one dead body, but like they kill everyone who is a part of this like archaeological dig. So, because like all the spare Zoonoids who weren't in the ship eventually are like, we're gonna just kill everybody off because they are no longer needed. Once we get the unit, that's all we came for. So so Barker does not give in to Crane's uh, offer and he leaves. But Crane is just like, well, like I'm still gonna come after you anyways because I got the Guyver unit, and so somebody's becoming the Guyver pretty dang soon, and it's gonna be probably someone on my side. So Barker is to eventually go back, and so now Barker has to actually just uh, go and tell Corey the truth at this point to just say, hey, like, I need to tell you the truth about what's really going on because Crane is uh, like, some of the people that you're working with are Zoonoids. If anything, uh, like, Kronos is an actual thing here. The Kronos Corporation is here full fledgedly trying to uh, like kill everyone, and you're probably going to be next, and so I'm going to try to save you, kind of thing. Cause before, like, we also have Atkins who was talking to Barker and was to tell him it's like, hey man, like Cronus is here. Like Cronus is working here. Cronus is Crane. Cronus is these guys, and that and Barker was just like, well, wait a minute, like all those were taken out, like where I'm from, and it's like, well, yeah, maybe the L.A. branch, but not this one, like, and so because Atkins is working to take down the Cronus Corporation here. And so now Barker is now here, and he's the Guyver to protect this new region of people from this Kronos Corporation. And so, but even Atkins doesn't have like the full range of information. Like he doesn't know what the Guyver unit can do. And so while because eventually like Atkins and Barker at that time when they're talking to one another, both Atkins and Barker didn't know exactly who to trust because they didn't know who is a zoonoid and who isn't, but eventually they figured that out. And they obviously know that it's Crane uh, and anybody else that seems to be in power. Because eventually, when Corey is to bring the Guyver unit to Crane, all of a sudden we have Crane who's taking the Guyver unit, and Crane's like security guard is grabbing onto Corey, and like Marcus is just kind of like, I'm not getting my hands dirty. Like if anything, like just don't hurt my daughter, but I'm like my hands are just up in the air. I'm not gonna cause trouble. So that leads us to like having Barker telling Corey the truth, and while that's happening, we have Atkins who's listening in to try to uh, if Barker is going to slip on any information about the Guyver unit or what it can do or anything. And Barker is to kind of tell Corey, like, of the zoonoids and everything with the exclusion of, like him basically saying that he is the Guyver. And so, like, he ends up kind of like going away before he spills the beans about that. But what ends up happening anyways is that Corey ends up being taken and being put into this Jeep. And so both of these security guards are taking Corey, I guess, to kind of have a kind of sure thing that they're gonna like make it out of here without any kind of trouble, I guess, from Marcus, because I guess Marcus is starting to have a change of heart because all of a sudden Marcus is to turn into a zoonoid and he is to lift up this Jeep and flip it over. And so once Corey gets out of this Jeep, Marcus is to say, like, woman, like, run away, like, and so Marcus is now to take on like two zoonoids that are to be coming from top of car, which doesn't make sense to me. Like they're flying from the top of the car, which doesn't like I'm like, how do they get from top of car out? Or like this is like the car flipped over, so they came up from the bottom part of the so that doesn't make sense to me. I guess they just have to be that ridiculously strong, I guess. Well, they like tear through like but it still just kind of baffles me and how like really and truly strong these characters are that their claws are just that like good, but whatever. So they tear through the bottom part flying up, and so we have Rhino Kitty Kitty Lick Lick, and we have now a bug zoonoid that I'm like, you know what, like Power Rangers, but you know what, it's cool. Like, all right, so Marcus is fighting off both of these zoonoids, and so all of a sudden Corey is to eventually just be like, you know what, maybe there's something about this one zoonoid, like maybe he's my dad. Like maybe that's my Marcus, my dad. Like why would this person come to my like rescue? Like why would this alien come to my rescue? Like so Corey is just like trying to defend this zoonoid. Like eventually she's going and like tossing rocks at the other zoonoids, and they just are like, really, really, woman, like come on, bro. So that just leads eventually what ends up happening is now Barker is to shout out to the heavens like Corey, and eventually like Corey used to yell out, Barker! And then so now all of a sudden we have like a superhero landing situation where like Barker is to jump like off of this like cliff edge like thing and turn into the Guyver midway through and then to drop down. And so now like we just have the Guyver just like running like crazy to make his way to take down these two Zoonoids and help out Marcus while he's getting freaking clocked. So Barker is to eventually make it to try to take down these two Zoonoids, and that leads us to this like water situation where like I honestly thought the way that they shot this was actually pretty cool, and a lot of people might feel differently. But I thought that this scene was kind of interesting. How we got. Let me. A lot of noises here. So, me adjusting my chair. So, Barker is to run, get to this spot. Now there's a whole water situation. And so now, like, this part is really shot really kind of cool. I really enjoyed it. Where the Guyver is just kind of, like, going, like, up and down into this water. Like, all of a sudden, like, the Guyver is to be, like, kind of circling around these two Zoonoids. And so the Guyver is to pop his head out and then pop his head back in the water, and this repetitious thing. But eventually that leads to eventually having the Guyver jump out of the water and freaking elbowing, of course, the insect Zoonoid and like blading him in the head. And so now we basically like quickly take that Zoonoid out. So now it's basically Guyver against like Rhino Zoonoid. And so like this gets like pretty gruesome. I was like, yeah. Like we have like the Guyver who ends up like kind of like forcing this Zoonoid up against this this kind of spot, and then all of a sudden we have like the Guyver who like takes out this Zoonoid's eyes and like brutally just freaking just kills it. And I'm just like, man, this is awesome. This is way better than the other film. Like, yeah, we had that like rip apart with Lisker moment, and like there was some couple spots there, like Dr. East getting his like chest open via the Guyver blade, but like, man, like I like the brutality of these fights a little bit better. It's a little bit cool to see these spots. So both Corey and Marcus are kind of in the same spot together, and so all of a sudden the Guyver is to make his way back where Corey is, but Guyver is to just see another like Zoonoid, and so Guyver is going into this kind of spin move to take out Marcus because he doesn't know any better. And Corey's like, wait, stop, in this like slow motion, like, and then so the Guyver just narrowly like stops like before like giving a little bit of a face poking of elbow blade in the face of Corey, and we can kind of tell that this like elbow blade is kind of like it's obviously like like plastic or styrofoam or whatever. Like you can kind of tell how it just kind of wiggles a little bit. It's like, yeah, that seems a little fake. But anyway, so Corey is like, hey, like, do not take this one out. This one's with me, kind of thing. And so all of a sudden Marcus is to run off because like he realizes that like his daughter is going to finally see him for who he really is, and so he like runs off because like, hey man, I'm ugly, so I'm gonna run off. But eventually Marcus comes back and tries to like go and uh like protect his daughter yet again. So this just leads us to having Barker tell Corey that they need to blow up the ship. That uh that they need to blow this thing up because reasonably they can do any number of things with this ship. They can probably like go back home technically and send reinforcements. Like they could do any number of things. Like beyond like this ship could turn into a weapon. Like it, all kinds of things are kind of rattling around in my head. So that just leads both Barker and Corey to set up all of these explosives all around the ship. And so that eventually has, of course, to be this now like standoff like thing where Crane is just like, okay, like now we really need to go after this Guyver. And so and so Barker is to have Corey like continue to set up the explosives, and so Barker is going back into the ship one last time to try and talk with it, try to communicate with it. But he's realizing he's like, oh well, like if anything, like I guess like even though you are calling me here, like you're like basically calling the wrong guy, and so Corey is to switch, or Corey, Barker is to switch into being the Guyver, and so that's when the ship recognizes the Guyver, and so the ship is imbowing or imbuing or whatever the Guyver with a bunch of information of the history of zoonoids and Guyvers and everything, and so we're to see the like the first ever like zoonoids that had turned who were cavemen, and eventually they're just like dancing around this fire and like to just kind of quickly show that what Barker had drew about that whole like circle with the thing on, like that's actually a ship being lifted off, and so evidently there was a pretty decent number of those alien ships that had landed onto this planet and then left. But eventually, at the end of this film, we are to see this ship leave. So, one way or the other, right? Anyways, so, because explosives. So, Barker is to get the whole history of everything and to find out like his lineage and whichever. So that is to make him realize that that the best part about the humans becoming zoonoids, like that was the key thing for people to just become zoonoids. That was like the key, like if anything, Guyvers were just meant to be a weapon, and really that. So like Guyver is kind of like the bad part of this whole transaction of things, where like the humans became like zoonoids, like that was just like the peak of their evolution, and so the Guyver was just made to just kill, and that's all like it was ever like. It's basically like the aliens had given like the zoonoids a gun and said, "Hey, go ahead and use it." Like that's basically the Guyver in a nutshell. Is like, "Hey, like here's a gun, go and kill somebody with it." Like that's the Guyver for whoever couldn't easily just become a zoonoid. So but the so Barker is to eventually get like this whole backstory being shown to him, and so he gets back out of the ship, and so uh, Corey is setting up all these explosives, and so now Crane is making his way back to the ship to just be like, hey, like, what are you kind of doing here? Like, we can't let you guys like explode the ship. Like, we're gonna definitely. I'm sure they're gonna like keep it and whatever to like be able to use it as a weapon like the Guyver would. And plus, also, they're still like, maybe we can kind of like get that whole Guyver thing. But so Crane is to, of course, grab Corey, and of course now Marcus is to come back down there and just be like, you know what, I like I sat aside and like I didn't want to be a dog in this fight, but like now I'm willing to be a dog in this fight, and I'm going to like fight for my daughter and like fight for like the rest of the human race. And so Marcus is to start fighting Crane, and that is to just lead to Crane just stabbing Marcus to quite possibly die, but really just can't cement that. Like, also, we had one point where Atkins was to try and arrest like all of the like zoonoids, but eventually all the zoonoids like took out all of like, because Atkins eventually called backup, like, which wasn't a lot of guys, but Atkins like called in a bunch of like reinforcements, and man did they get easily wiped out because there was a whole like three of them. And so Crane was just like, yeah, they're just gonna get mincemeat, like, you might as well say goodbye to them now. So but yeah, so Atkins like had to be forced to go to this cave also, because it's like, yeah, like we're just gonna have him just come on down, because he's the next contestant on. He's probably gonna die soon. So uh, what ends up eventually happening is there's this whole scramble, this whole fight out. Guyver is to eventually take out some of the zoonoids, and eventually Atkins is to get the briefcase that is to supposedly have the Guyver unit. And so, like, he's playing keep away with the other zoonoids. I think the female zoonoid is like chasing him through these like parts of this cave, and Atkins is consistently looking back as this girl is like, "Yeah, like I'm coming for you." And so, like, this whole chase eventually comes out to nothing, because the Guyver is to have Atkins like try to protect Corey, but Atkins is like, well, who's going to protect me? As he goes and is like chased off by this one female zoonoid. And but yeah, so eventually, like, all these other zoonoids eventually get wiped out. So one way or the other, and so then now we have both uh, the big battle, which of course is to be Crane versus Guyver, because Marcus is down. So Atkins is to open up the briefcase to show that the Guyver unit is not in the briefcase, because kind of the way he opened that would like obviously be like, well, the Guyver unit isn't going to be there, because if it was, it would have fell out. So just my thought process. So Crane is to show to us that he has the Guyver unit, and so now Crane is going to put on the Guyver unit, and so now, like, the Guyver is just like, oh my god, like a Zoonoid Guyver? Like, this is to be like a freaking like notch up here. This is to be like a definite uh like a definite like bigger rung of things. because like it's kind of like Terminators when eventually like Arnold was to fight like the liquid metal Terminator and the like absurd other levels of Terminator, like the Terminator and all that goofy stuff. Like it gets where it's like the same thing here. Now that this is a sequel, they have to even make it even much more so difficult for the Guyver to be able to take this thing down. But actually, when this Zoanoid Guyver is to have this suit, like, yeah, the Guyver is kind of getting, like, clocked, but also, like, this Zoanoid Guyver is also having, like, glitches. Like, he's starting to, like, move his head weirdly, and, like, yeah, he might have that power, but it also feels like it's still his kind of, like, weakness also. It kind of feels that the Guyver could just wait till like this Zoanoid Guyver is to just have like more problems, because the Guyver is mentioning to Crane that it's like, you know what, like I think that Guyver unit is actually defective, and you're eventually gonna have to get recalled there, buddy. So what is to happen here is that eventually the Guyver is to go and of course like pull the ball out of this Guyver's head, and so because Corey ends up like shooting it in the head, but that's not good enough. Uh, like the Guyver is also ripping the one ball weakness out of this Zoanoid Guyver's head. And so we just see the Zoanoid Guyver who is to be bleeding like through this spot. I'm like, well, they didn't do that in the other movie. But yeah, so like Crane is just like whining and crying for way too long. And so like the Zoanoid Guyver is to Crane, let's just say, is to drop a knee and just be like howling in pain. And so the Guyver realizes there's only one way to take this thing out. And so he basically uses the exact same weapon that took the Zoanoid or the Zolord out in the first film. The Guyver goes and opens up his chest and wipes out this Crane Zoanoid Guyver, basically so this thing does not like revive or whatever. They wipe everything out, which that could have been one way to like kind of like tease that there could have been a sequel where all of a sudden you could have had like the one ball left, not like all of a sudden having it being stumbled into someone's hands and like be like, oh, like this thing is all of a sudden reviving. What the heck? It's becoming a different Guyver. And so, like, they could have probably teased at that, but they didn't. But anyways, so the Guyver is to wipe Crane out, and so the next move is to have the Guyver forcibly take this ship, and so the Guyver is to pull out his weakness like ball and have it like come out a little bit further out of his head to force this ship to fly back from where once it came. And I'm like, well, you probably couldn't have like exploded it with the dynamite anyways, because it probably would have done nothing. So the Guyver forces this ship to go back from whence it came, and so that pushes both the Guyver and Corey and Atkins to get the heck out of there, because eventually this cave is going to just kind of come down. And so they all leave. I guess Marcus is just straight up dead because I think they end up like burying him afterwards, I think. Heaven forbid I remember things. So, so Barker is to now tell Atkins is like, well, hey, we're gonna need you in the future. Like, you need to fight this war with us. And Barker is just like, I'm going to fight my way out of here to ride off into the sunset, Atkins. Like, I'll see you later. And so, but Atkins is like, but where am I going to get a hold of you? And Atkins is like, and Barker is telling Atkins, like, well, see you later. Like, I'm going to drive off with Corey and just make out with her consistently. Like, probably, like, quite a few feet away from you. Because it's like, they drive for a little bit and then they just stop and then they like kiss one another. And Atkins is like, good man. Or he's like, he has like I'll see you later, son, or some bizarrish like one liner after that. And so that just leads both Corey and Barker to kiss, and like that basically just ends the movie. And so with what I've kind of said here, like, I don't know if I quite feel like I got everything, but I feel like I got a roundabout gist of most of this movie. A lot of people are just wanting to go and have me be in much more further detail about that. This is gonna be good enough for me. Like, this one was like 2 hours and 8 minutes. So there's probably gonna be something that slips the cracks of this movie, um, but I also like went and reviewed this in a very roundabout way. So I'm never gonna watch like this movie again to try to have like a tiny bit of microscopic more detail, especially for this film, because if it goes well, thank God. But if it doesn't, then like I would just say, yeah, probably nobody wants to watch like a 2 hour and 8 minute film. Uh, but then again, I could be surprised because like there's been a lot of other things that were like actually trending. It was like, whoa, like that was actually like a 2 hour movie, and wow, like people are interested in what I had to say about that. So thank you for watching this. If you watched all the way through, because you probably left off at some point. So with that said, thank you. But I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.